Jeffrey Dahmer, is remembered as one of the most horrifying serial killers ever recorded, not just because he murdered, but because of what he did. After the killing, born in 1960 in Wisconsin, Dahmer grew up isolated, emotionally detached. As a child, he collected roadkill, dissected animals, and explored death with disturbing curiosity. Behind his quiet personality, a storm was growing. After his parents, Dahmer was left alone, emotionally abandoned and increasingly consumed by dark fantasies. In 1978, he acted on them for the first time. Between 1978 and 1991, Dahmer hunted young men, many from marginalized communities, suppression them with money photos or the promise of companionship. Once inside his apartment, drugged, them killed them and crossed lines few killers have ever crossed. He performed necrophilia, dismembered bodies, kept skull-stored bones, and even attempted to create zombies by drilling into victims' skulls and injecting boiling water or acid. Police entered his apartment in 1991 and found photographs of dismembered body, skulls, and cabinets, human remains in the fridge, and a 55-gallon barrel filled with acid. It was a house of horrors. Dahmer admitted he wanted complete control, a partner who would never leave. His killings were driven by loneliness, abandoned, a twisted desire to possess another person entirely. He knew what he was doing and he couldn't stop. For years, police missed multiple chances to stop him. One victim escaped, half-naked, but was escorted back to Dahmer after Dahmer convinced officers it was a lover's dispute. It was one of the biggest investigative failures in U.S. history. In July 1991, another victim escaped, flagged down police and led them back to Dahmer's apartment. What officers saw incidentally the case instantly. Dahmer confessed in cold, emotionless detail to every murder. In 1992, he was sentenced to 15 life terms. On November 28, 1994, Jeffrey Dahmer was beaten to death by another inmate inside a Wisconsin prison. Many believe it was the closest thing to justice his victims ever received. David Berkowitz, better known as the Son of Sam, turned New York City into a living nightmare during the summer of 1976. He wasn't just killing people, he was holding an entire city hostage. Born in 1953, adopted as a baby but grew up feeling abandoned, angry, and disconnected. After his adoptive mother did something inside him snapped. By his teen, she was setting fire, shooting animals, and searching for something that would finally give him control. In 1976, Berkowitz claimed he began hearing voices he believed belonged to demons. He saw a neighbor's dog was ordering him to kill, and he listened. Between 1976 and 1977, Berkowitz attacked couples in parked cars and women walking alone at night. He used a .44 caliber revolver, firing without warning, then disappearing before anyone realized what had happened. The killings were random, cold, and impossible to predict. New York was terrified. Women cut their hair, stopped going out at night, and begged police for protection. Then the letters arrived. Berkowitz wrote to police and newspapers calling himself Son of Sam. He mocked Detective Edsel to the public and promised more blood. The press blasted his word sacris front pages, turning him into the most feared man in America. He didn't just want to kill, he wanted fame. And he wanted everyone to know he was watching. Police launched the biggest manhunt in New York history. Thousands of tips, dozens of suspects, and mounting pressures, more people died. But his downfall came from something embarrassingly simple: a parking ticket. A witness saw a suspicious car near one of the shootings. Police checked all tickets in the area. One name stood out: David Berkowitz. When police arrived at his car, they found the .44 revolver, maps, and notes. Berkowitz emerged from his building's mild and said, "Well, you got me." The nightmare was finally over. Berkowitz confessed to the murders and was sentenced to 6 life terms. He later claimed he wasn't possessed and admitted he lied about the dog. To seem interesting, today David Berkowitz sits in prison as the Son of Sam, a name that once froze New York in fear and still sends a chill down the spine of Annie Onuho remembers the Summer of Terror. Pedro Alonso El Pazis, known as the Monster of the Andes, a man so deadly may have murdered more little girls than any other killer in history. But the most terrifying part isn't what he did, it's what happened after. El Pez was born in 1948 in Colombia, a world of poverty, violence, and survival. His mother was a sex worker, his childhood filled with abuse, and at age 8 she threw him out of the house after catching him assaulting his sister. From that moment the streets became his home and brutality became his teacher. In prison for stealing cars, Pez claimed he was gang raped by other inmates. He later said that moment turned him into a predator, and when he walked out of prison he walked out with a mission. El Pez traveled across Colombia and Peru pretending to be friendly, harmless fees. He approached little girls in crowded markets or on busy streets, speaking soft, malinchromanism gifts or offering help. When they trusted him, he led them away, strangled them and buried them in shallow graves in fields, ditches and abandoned areas. His methods were silent and repeated with terrifying precision. In one rainy season claimed he had killed 3 girls every week. Entire villages panicked. Parents kept children inside, markets emptied, and rumors spread of a monster who walked in daylight and hunted in plain sight. El Pez Said believed he was saving the girls from growing up to become prostitutes like his mother. He felt no remorse, no hesitation, no doubt. His calm explanation shocked investigators more than the graves themselves. In 1980, he tried to take another girl in Ecuador. This time she screamed. Nearby market sellers chased him down, beat him and held him until police arrived. During interrogation, Pez broke. He led Detective Esto 53 graves. The truth was bigger than anyone feared. He confessed to killing over 300 girls. Ecuador convicted him of 110 murders and, because of the law at the time, sentenced him to only 16 years. He served 14. In 1994, Pedro Alonso El Pez stepped out of persona free man. Ecuador released him. Colombia released him. And then he disappeared. Interpol once said, may be alive today. And if he is still out there walking among people like he always did. The monster of the Andes never truly stopped. Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, terrorized Los Angeles. With a spree of murders so brutal, the entire city slept in fear. For over a year, born in 1960 in El Paso, Texas, Ramirez grew up surrounded by violence. His cousin, a Vietnam veteran, showed him photographs of torture and mutilation. At home, faced abuse, trauma and a growing obsession with darkness. By his teens, she turned to drugs, burglary and Satanism. The transformation was complete. In 1984, Ramirez decided to act on his fantasies. He didn't have a type or a pattern or a method. His only goal was violence. Between 1984 and 1985, Ramirez broke into homes in the middle of the night, attacking men, women, children, even elderly victims. He shot, stabbed, bloodied, and assaulted with no predictable pattern. Sometimes he left satanic symbols at crime scene. Sometimes he whispered, "Hail Satan," as he murdered. The randomness was the true terror. Los Angeles changed overnight. People barred their windows, slept with lights on and but every gun they could find. Fear took over the city. Ramirez was driven by chaos and destruction. He worshipped terror, loved the fear he created and believed violence gave him power. He wasn't organized like other killers, he was pure unpredictability. That made him almost impossible to catch. Police formed a massive task force of it every time they got Claude Ramirez slipped away, until one night they found a crucial clue, a single fingerprint at a crime scene. They ran it through the database, and the name appeared, Richard Ramirez. His mugshot was relicetto the entire city. Ramirez didn't go quietly. A group of citizens in East La recognized him, chased him down. The street beat him and held him until police arrived. The nightmare was over. Ramirez was convicted of 13 murders, 11 sexual assaults, 5 attempted murders and 14 burglaries. He was sentenced to death but never executed. In 2013, he died of cancer after decades on death row. His crimes left a permanent scar in Los Angeles. Daniel Camargo Barbosa is one of South America's most prolific serial killers, responsible for murdering over 150 young girls. Quiet, methodical, and twice he walked free. Born in 1930 in Colombia, raised by an abusive stepmother, Woe beat him, humiliated him and forced him to wear women's clothes. This trauma warped his views on women and shaped the violence he later unleashed. As an adult, Camargo discovered a partner had lied about being a virgin. He snapped, and from that point on, he targeted only young girls, the youngest, the most innocent. In the 1970, she lured school-age girls along forest paths and isolated roads, speaking softly, acting harmless. When he gained their trust, assaulted, strangled, hid their bodies in remote fields and dense woods. Colombian investigators believe he killed around 80 girls for being caught. Camargo was sentenced to 25 years, but in 1984, he escaped during a prison uprising, walked out unnoticed, and fled to Ecuador. Between 1984 and 1986, girls aged 9 to 16 began disappearing weekly. Ecuador estimated more than 110 victims in just 2 years. He left almost no evidencino paterno witnesses. He was a ghost moving from town to town. In 1986, a 12-year-old escaped. Him identified him and police arrested him. Inside his hideout, they found clothing from dozens of victims. Camargo confessed, Calm Lion guided police to multiple burial sites. He admitted to over 150 murders. Ecuador gave him 16 years, their maximum penalty at the time. In 1994, Camargo was stabbed to death in prison by the brother of one of his victims. His exact count remains unknown, but investigators agree Daniel Camargo Barbosa, was one of the most deadly killers in modern history. Ted Bundy is one of the most infamous serial killers in U.S. history, not only because of what he did but because of how he appeared. He was handsome, educating, able to convince almost anyone that he was safe. That mask is what made him deadly. Born in 1946, Bundy grew up believing his mother was his sister and his grandparents were his parents. This early identity confusion mixed with emotional instability turned into a storm he hid behind a perfect smile. He attended College volunteered in political campaigns and appeared destined for success. Meanwhile, an entirely different Ted Bundy was starting to emerge. By the early 1970s, Bundy's fantasies turned violent, and he began hunting women who looked like someone from his past. Long hair center party and alone. He developed methods, cues and tricks that allowed him to get close with suspicion. Between 1974 and 1978, Bundy abducted women from college campus parking lots and even crowded areas without anyone noticing. He faked injuries where slings or casts, asked for help, and when victims leaned in he attacked. He assaulted, killed them and sometimes returned to their bodies to continue the violence long after death. He crossed multiple states, leaving investigators confused and terrified of a killer who was both organized and unpredictable. Bundy craved power, control and dominance. He viewed his victims as possessions, people, and his charm was his favorite weapon. He enjoyed manipulating very around him victims, friendly judges. Bundy was stopped for a traffic violation in 1975, leading police to discover tools associated with several abductions. He was arrested but escaped custody twice, once by jumping from a courthouse window and once by cutting through his cell ceiling. Each escaped to more attacks and more victims. In 1978, Bundy was finally captured in Florida after killing again. This time there were no more escapes. He was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to death. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair. Crowds outside Chiritis, one of America's most charming monsters, was finally gone. Harold Shipman is believed to have murdered over 250 people, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in modern history. And the most terrifying part, he did it all while working as a trusted family doctor. Born in 1946 in Nottingham, Shipman had a quiet, unremarkable childhood until his mother fell ill with cancer. He watched doctors ease her pain with morphine injections, an image that stayed with him for the rest of his life. He later trained to become a physician, well-respected, well-liked, and seen as a man who genuinely cared. But behind the white coat was crafting a method of killing almost impossible to detect. After starting his practice, Shipman discovered that he had full control over the most vulnerable people in society. Elderly patients who trusted him completely, and he used that trust against them. From 1975 to 1998, Shipman injected his patients with lethal doses of diamorphine, a powerful medical-grade heroin. Most victims were found peacefully in bed or in their armchairs as if they had simply slipped away. He altered medical records, faked symptoms and forged documents to make every death look natural. Families thanked him for trying to help their loved ones, not knowing he was the result they never woke up. Experts believe Shipman had a god complex. He enjoyed deciding who lived and who died. Some believe he reenacted the moment he watched morphine ease his mother's pain, twisting compassion into control. He didn't kill for money or revenge but for the quiet thrill of absolute power. For years no one questioned the deaths because Shipman was respected, trusted, protected by his profession, until one family noticed something strange. A will that had been changed with Shipman as the beneficiary. Police investigated and patterns emerged. Too many patients being too suddenly ill under his care. In 1998, Shipman was arrested. Investigators exhumed bodies and discovered morphine levels far beyond medical necessity. He was convicted of 15 murders, though the true number is believed to exceed 250. In 2004, Harold Shipman hanged himself in his prison cell, ending the life of a doctor who weaponized trust and became one of the deadliest killers on record. Dennis Rader is known as the BTK killer, a name he proudly gave himself to describe exactly how he murdered. Born in 1945, Rader grew up in an ordinary family with no obvious signs of violence, but behind the normal life he fantasized about bondage, control and cruelty. Even as a child, as an adult, worked as a compliance officer, a church leader and a husband, blending perfectly into suburban life. No one suspected they were living next to a serial killer. In 1974, Rader decided to act on his fantasies, and once he started, couldn't stop. Rader stalked his victims victims broke into their homes, bound them, tortured them, and killed them slowly. He murdered entire families, women, aliened, even children, choosing victims at random based on opportunity and desire. He took souvenir-exposed bodies and wrote detailed descriptions of his crimes for his own pleasure. Rader didn't just kill, he curated every moment. BTK was driven by pure sadism. He wanted control, domination, fear. He loved the idea that police had no idea who he was. And he loved even more that he could walk past them smiling. For years he sent letters to news stations taunting detective-esque crimes and demanding attention. Police launched massive investigations, but Rader hid behind his relentless a church letter and family man. Then he vanished for over a decade until 2004, when BTK returned with a new letter. And that will be his biggest mistake. Rader asked police if they could trace a floppy disk if he sent one. Police lead-in told him no. He sent it. The metadata pointed straight to his church computer with Rader's name on it. After decades of terror, was finally arrested in 2005. Rader confessed to 10 murders and was sentenced to 10 life terms with no chance of parole. He now spends every day in a concrete cell, a monster who once wanted Famino, forgotten behind locked doors.